Welcome to the Universal Rainbow Faith Blogcast, where spiritual truth, reflection, and transformation come to life.
You know that feeling when you're walking home alone at night and you hear footsteps echo behind you?
Oh, yeah.
You reach into your pocket, right? You pull out your keys and you thread them between your fingers, making this sort of makeshift weapon. It's almost just instinct at this point.
Right. It's a completely defensive posture. You're basically bracing for impact. And, I mean, it is a universally understood experience for women trying to navigate public spaces.
Yeah. And that defensive posture, that feeling, that is exactly where you, the learner, are starting today's deep dive with us. We are looking at a really comprehensive and undeniably provocative essay. It's titled Countering the Myths of What is a Woman, Trans Women and the Real Fight Against Misogyny.
It's a heavy hitter.
It really is. It was written by Reverend Paula Josephine Sadler and published on the Universal Rainbow Faith website. So, our mission today is to unpack the author's core arguments about, well, how womanhood is defined. We're going to dig into the statistical realities of gender-based violence and really explore why the author believes the feminist movement has to be intrinsically linked with transgender rights.
Now, before we go any further, we need to make something exceptionally clear.
Yes, definitely.
This source wades into some of the most highly charged political, social, and cultural debates of our time. Like, the author actively critiques dominant cultural narratives, and she explicitly names and challenges specific conservative commentators.
People like Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, and Candace Owens.
Exactly. And as your guys on this deep dive, our job is not to take a side.
Right. We are not here to endorse the religious or political or social viewpoints of the Universal Rainbow Faith, or Reverend Sadler for that matter.
Nor are we taking the side of the commentator she's critiquing.
Nope. Our sole job, and really this is our promise to you, the listener, is to impartially convey and analyze the ideas, the arguments, and the statistics exactly as they are presented in the original source material.
Yeah, we are just here to examine the architecture of the argument.
So let's get back to those clenched keys. The author uses that image to introduce her friend, who is a transgender woman, walking home and gripping her keys in that exact same, like, white-knuckled way.
Right. And the author's premise there is that a street harasser or an attacker, they don't pause to check chromosomes before acting.
Wow. Yeah.
She starts there to immediately shift the definition of womanhood away from biology, anchoring it instead in this shared social experience and shared vulnerability.
Okay, let me make sure I'm following the logic here.
Sure.
The author is essentially describing misogyny as this dark universal tax, like a tax that anyone presenting as female is forced to pay just to exist in public.
Precisely. That is exactly it. It's the street harassment, the threat of violence, the constant hypervigilance, the tax levied by patriarchal systems, and the author is saying that trans women are paying that exact same tax. And to build this case, she points to the staggering reality that 1 in 3 women globally will experience physical or sexual violence.
Wait, is she referring exclusively to cisgender women in that statistic?
No, and that is a crucial point in her essay. She emphasizes that this statistic absolutely includes trans women.
Okay.
She also points out that nearly 99% of rapists are men, and that in the United States, about 1/3 of murdered women are killed by their current or former male partners.
That is just, those numbers are so bleak. So she is using these numbers to establish a foundational premise, right? That misogyny targets femininity and lived social identity, not just a biological reproductive system.
Exactly. By front-loading these grim statistics, she's arguing that the patriarchy and the violence and control it exerts is the real common enemy for both cisgender and transgender women.
It's a really strategic narrative choice.
It is. It's designed to foster solidarity. She is pointing at the statistics and saying, look at the real threat.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Someone listening might say, okay, the shared fear of violence is real, and the social treatment is real, but that doesn't just erase the biological reality of being female.
Right, the biological argument.
Yeah. How does the author reconcile that strict biological argument, specifically the ability to give birth, that is so often used to draw a hard line between cisgender and transgender women?
Well, the author tackles that head on. She deconstructs the very idea that a womb defines a woman.
Okay, how so?
She points out that if womanhood is strictly defined by the capacity for childbirth, we would have to question the womanhood of millions of cisgender women.
Right. The text mentions that about 10% of cisgender women in the U.S. struggle with fertility. That's around 6 million women. But surely the author isn't equating a biological condition like infertility with transitioning gender.
No, she isn't equating the experiences entirely. But she is examining the mechanism of how we categorize people.
Okay, I see.
She brings up cisgender women who have had hysterectomies due to cancer, women who have gone through menopause, or women who are born without a uterus entirely.
Right, which happens.
Exactly. And she also mentions intersex variations. So, for example, women with XY chromosomes who have a uterus, or women with X chromosomes who don't have a functioning one.
Wow.
Her argument is that biology is full of natural variations, and we don't revoke a cisgender woman's identity when her biology diverges from that strict textbook definition of reproduction.
You know, that makes me think of an analogy.
What's
It's like how we categorize a car.
Okay.
If we define a car strictly by its ability to drive, does a car with a broken engine suddenly cease to be a car?
Right.
We still recognize the shape, we still call it a car. The author is basically saying, we already make these allowances, we already do this for cisgender women who don't fit the strict reproductive mold, so why not extend that same recognition to transgender women?
That is a really highly effective way to visualize her rhetorical device.
Thanks.
Because she argues that reducing womanhood to a single biological trait, specifically reproduction, has historically been a tool used to oppress all women.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, by demanding women be defined by their wombs, society has historically limited their rights, keeping them out of the workforce, and confined entirely to domestic roles.
Ah, right. There is a very poignant quote she includes from a trans woman who noted that after transitioning, she went from being judged by her accomplishments to being judged by her appearance.
Yes, and that is a shift that every single woman recognizes.
Totally.
The text asserts that the essence of womanhood lies in identity and lived social experience. The author says we readily accept this truth for cis women, and we have to extend it to trans women. Otherwise, we are just reinforcing the very biological reductionism that feminism has fought against for over a century.
Right, that makes sense. But if the biological argument is historically flawed and, logically inconsistent, then why is the public still so obsessed with biology when it comes to physical spaces?
The bathrooms.
Yes, which leads me to the bathroom debate. Why are public restrooms the epicenter of so much panic and legislation?
This is a crucial pivot in the essay. To understand why bathrooms are the battleground, we really have to look at the underlying psychological mechanism.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Bathrooms are spaces of physical vulnerability. They are inherently private.
Yeah.
When bad faith actors want to trigger primal protective instincts in the public, especially to push legislation, targeting a space of vulnerability bypasses logic completely.
Yeah.
It goes straight to the amygdala.
It just creates panic.
Exactly.
So the author is framing this as a manufactured panic.
Yes. She explicitly calls the idea of the transgender predator in a women's bathroom a myth. She states there is zero evidence that trans women in bathrooms increase safety risks or crime.
Wait, zero evidence? Surely there are some statistics driving this public fear, though. People don't just legislate out of thin air.
Well, the author flips that narrative completely. She argues that the danger in bathrooms is absolutely real, but it is directed at trans people, not caused by them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The numbers she provides are really sobering. Nearly 70% of trans people report verbal harassment, and 9% report physical assault, literally just for trying to use a public restroom.
That is awful. And the text details how this violence extends far beyond the bathroom door, too.
It does.
It says trans people are living at the intersection of misogyny and transphobia. They are over 4 times more likely than cisgender people to experience violent victimization. We're talking 86 violent victimizations per 1,000 people compared to 24 per 1,000 for cis women.
It's a massive disparity.
Yeah.
Furthermore, nearly half, 47%, have been sexually assaulted in their lifetime.
My God.
The essay notes that globally, at least 350 transgender and gender-diverse people were murdered last year, and 32 of those were documented just in the U.S.
And then the author adds this detail about the aftermath of that violence that is just, it's heartbreaking. She calls it the second wound.
Right, the misgendering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When trans homicide victims are reported on by police or the media, they are misgendered or dead-named nearly 40% of the time.
Yeah.
Surviving an assault or literally losing your life, and the official record refuses to even acknowledge who you are.
It is the ultimate erasure. You are victimized for your identity, and then your identity is stripped from you in death.
So if you are a learner looking at these statistics, you have to ask the critical question.
Right, which is?
Why does society expend so much energy policing bathrooms when the data points to domestic violence and male perpetrators as the overwhelming statistical threat to women.
And the author's analysis points to a classic divide-and-conquer strategy.
Explain that.
She argues that hateful caricatures, labeling trans women as frauds or claiming they are tricking society, are weaponized to justify this violence and this massive legislative focus.
So it's a distraction technique. Keep everyone fighting over the restroom door so they don't look at the house bringing down behind them.
Precisely.
Right.
By painting trans women as a threat, society finds a convenient scapegoat.
Right.
Because it's much easier for a politician to pass a law banning someone from a bathroom than it is to do the incredibly hard, complex work of dismantling entrenched systemic misogyny and male violence.
Wow. Yeah.
The author emphasizes that trans women are not the ones stripping away reproductive rights or enforcing oppressive regimes. They are suffering under those exact same systems.
But I noticed the author is very careful not to just paint trans women as victims here.
She is.
Because if she ended the essay there, it would just be this relentless catalog of trauma. But she deliberately pivots, right?
Yes, she makes a vital shift in the text. She reframes transgender and non-binary people as essential community builders.
I loved this part.
Yeah. She points to data showing that LGBTQ individuals are 3.5 times more likely to provide care for non-biological family or friends in need.
The essay talks about chosen aunties and ballroom house mothers.
Right.
These are trans women stepping into familial supportive roles. They're mentoring marginalized youth who have often been rejected by their own biological families. They're organizing community drives, setting up meal trains, doing the very caregiving work that society traditionally celebrates as the absolute pinnacle of womanhood.
Exactly. The author uses this to show that trans women share the nurturing spirit that is so cherished in womanhood, proving that kindness and solidarity aren't confined to XX chromosomes.
Right.
But she doesn't stop at modern social roles. She actually looks backward at history and inward at human biology to establish precedents for a gender spectrum.
I found this section really fascinating because it totally counters the narrative that being transgender is some new internet-born trend.
Right, it's not new at all.
She points out that many indigenous and historical cultures recognize multiple genders.
Yes, and it's really worth unpacking how those cultures actually operated, because it wasn't just a label for them, it was a real societal function.
Give me an example.
So, for example, she mentions the Mucks of the Zapotec culture in Mexico.
Okay.
These are individuals assigned male at birth who adopt traditional female roles and dress. But crucially, they aren't viewed as outcasts at all. They are considered a recognized third gender with specific, valued social and caregiving responsibilities within their communities.
Oh, that's beautiful. And she also mentions the Two-Spirit people in Native American nations, right?
Right. So Two-Spirit is a modern umbrella term, but it reflects historical traditions across many tribes where an individual was believed to embody both a masculine and a feminine spirit. These individuals often held revered roles as healers or mediators or spiritual leaders. And she also mentions the Hydras of South Asia, which is this ancient identity with a really complex social history of both marginalization and spiritual reverence.
So the author is establishing that strict gender binaries are actually a relatively recent and often heavily Western imposition. But then she takes it a step further. She grounds this diversity in biology itself. She cites that up to 1.7% of the population is born with intersex traits.
This is a really important figure in her argument.
Yeah.
Because intersex individuals are born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that just doesn't fit the typical definitions of female or male. This can mean variations in chromosomes or hormones or genitalia.
And I absolutely love the comparison she used here to explain that number.
The red hair.
Yes. She notes that 1.7% of the population is roughly comparable to the population of people born with red hair.
It really puts it in perspective.
It totally does. It's like looking at a massive ancient forest and aggressively insisting that there are only oak and pine trees allowed to exist, when history and biology itself show us this incredible, flourishing variety of plant life right in front of our eyes.
That's a great way to visualize it. The author uses that 1.7% red hair statistic to brilliantly normalize biological diversity. She argues that nature inherently loves diversity. It relies on it. Therefore, policing gender based on narrow, rigid stereotypes actually does violence to natural human reality.
which ties deeply into the religious and spiritual aspect of the source. Toward the end of the text, the Universal Rainbow Faith makes a specific point to include trans men and non-binary people in this fight.
Yes.
They literally declare them as sacred.
The text highlights how trans men face unique burdens, particularly the expectations of toxic masculinity post-transition.
Right, they are uniquely positioned to understand the pressures of both womanhood and manhood.
Exactly. And it notes how non-binary people challenge the binary structure entirely. They often face severe social ridicule and medical exclusion simply because our legal and social systems literally refuse to recognize that they exist.
The Universal Rainbow Faith declares that all gender identities are valid expressions of the human soul.
It's a powerful statement.
It is. And the author makes this really compelling point, that broadening gender norms doesn't just help trans people, it actually liberates everyone. Well, think about it. If we stop legally and socially policing what a woman is supposed to look like or act like or what jobs she can hold, it liberates the cisgender tomboy, the female CEO, and the woman who chooses not to have children just as much as it liberates trans people.
Oh, absolutely.
It takes the pressure off men, too.
Right. The author is arguing that the strict enforcement of gender roles is a trap.
Yeah.
When a cisgender woman doesn't fit a 1950s housewife ideal, her identity and worth can be questioned under the exact same patriarchal rules used to attack trans women.
It's all connected.
It is.
Right?
By uniting cisgender, transgender, and non-binary individuals, the feminist movement actually gains the numbers and the strength to gatecrash the systems of oppression, rather than spending all its energy gatekeeping womanhood.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We sure have.
Let's distill the core takeaway for you, the learner. The essay from the Universal Rainbow Faith argues that the true enemy of women's safety is misogyny and patriarchal control. The author's thesis is that by moving past gotcha questions like, what is a woman, and instead uniting across the entire gender spectrum, society can address actual systemic inequalities. Things like sexual violence, wage gaps, and maternal health crises.
The text ultimately calls for solidarity over fear. It frames transgender women not as a threat to feminism, but as its natural allies and an essential part of its future.
So why should you care about this deep dive? Why does this matter if you are, say, just prepping for a meeting or catching up on the news or just trying to understand the world a little better?
That's a fair question.
It matters because how a society defines, polices, and enforces gender roles ultimately dictates the freedoms, the expectations, and the physical safety of everyone, regardless of how you personally identify.
Exactly.
The boundaries society draws around gender affect the clothes you wear, the way you are treated in a boardroom, and the baseline assumptions people make about your capabilities and your worth.
It raises a really important question about the fundamental architecture of our social systems. The author argues that dividing women and defining them narrowly just makes it far easier for those in power to maintain control.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you to mull over on your own.
Let's hear it.
We've seen how the strict enforcement of a gender binary was historically designed to maintain a specific hierarchy of power.
Right.
If that's true, what might our society actually look like if we completely decoupled legal and social power from gender entirely? What if power had nothing to do with presentation?
That is definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us as we unpack this complex and vital topic.
Yes, we really appreciate you taking the time to learn with us. Until next time, keep digging deeper.
I was never a mistake, never hidden by design. Before the world could name me, love had already called me mine. I learned to quiet